So today's the day. Today is the day that we read Wish Tree 5.1, which is page 184 to page 211, which means today is the day that we finish the book. So hopefully you've been making some predictions. I sure hope that you have enjoyed the book. Just going back, the last line that Red spoke in our last section was, "It was enough to watch the sky freckled with stars, to smell the sweet wet earth, to listen to the beating hearts of the little ones I could keep safe, at least for one more night." So remember, we left that Francesca was going to have the tree cut down, caused a big muddy mess. She was tired of all the wishes being made. She thought it was ridiculous. And so here we are, page 184. It's actually, I believe it's actually page 185 where this chapter starts, chapter 46. Saturday morning dawned, clean and cool. Even before the sun made itself known, the animals and owls departed the safety of my limbs. Each family had found a new home, all in nearby trees on the same block. The skunks were going to remain under their porch. It made me happy to know that everyone would be staying in the neighborhood. One by one, they nuzzled me, whispering their goodbyes. The babies sniffled, especially Harold and Rose Petal and Flashlight. The parents tried to put on brave faces, but their trembling voices gave them away. It was awful, but I was glad to get it over with. I've always hated goodbyes. Bongo, for her part, insisted on staying with me to the bitter end. I knew better than to argue with her. By 6 a.m, Stefan and Samar were sitting together on Samar's porch. By 7, Sandy and Max had arrived. They parked across the street and sat in their cruiser, sipping coffee and eating donuts. By 8, 3 local reporters had arrived, armed with microphones and fancy equipment. They took video of the word leave. They talked about its meaning, about how it had changed the feel of the neighborhood. They also talked about me, the doomed wish tree. I didn't like the word doomed, but I had to admit it was accurate reporting. Francesca came at 8:30 carrying a cup of tea and dragging a small wooden ladder, the one she put out every year for the wishmakers. She went back home and promptly returned with Lewis and Clark on their kitty leashes. They were not cooperative. And then the wishes began. A toddler on her dad's shoulders reaching high. An old woman aided by 2 young girls. Neighbor after neighbor, many of whom I'd seen pass by over the years. Wish after wish after wish. Some on scraps of colorful fabric, many on paper tied with ribbon on a string. A few socks, 2 t-shirts, and 1 pair of underwear. At first, people came in small groups or one by one. But then, something changed. The trickle of people became a deluge. Many of them were from the elementary school, but there were parents and teachers too. 12 kids, 50, 100, and more. Every person seemed to be carrying an index card. Each card had a hole punched in it, with a piece of string looped through the hole. Stefan high-fived many of them, hugged his principal, waved to his teacher. Samar just sat on the steps with her parents, a quizzical expression on her face. One by one, the children tied their wishes to me. The principal and assistant principal and janitor and teachers all helped. My boughs had never been more laden. My heart had never been more hopeful, because as each child, as each neighbor, as each stranger placed a wish upon me, they looked at Samar and her parents and said the same thing. Stay. Within an hour, I was covered with the word stay. Extra wishes lay on the ground beneath me, piled like blossoms. Wishes made their way onto the porches, the railings, the sidewalk. After 216 rings, I thought I'd seen it all. Turns out, you're never too old to be surprised. Soon it became clear that the stay wishes had been Stefan's idea. With the help of his teacher, Stefan's whole class had secretly worked much of the previous school day making the index cards. Word spread quickly about the project. Before long, the whole school had joined in. "So this was your idea?" Samar asked Stefan. "I had a lot of help," he said. "It's a miracle we kept it a secret from you." Samar looked over at her parents. I don't know if this will change anything, she said. Stefan looked over at his parents. Me either. Thank you, though, Samar said, for trying. Stefan started to reply, but just then the timber terminator's truck pulled up. The end of my story was coming. Well, it had been a beautiful story. How lucky was I to have seen a day like today? But Stefan and Samar weren't giving up so easily. They ran straight to Francesca, who was busy untangling the kitties wound around her right leg. Please, Samar begged. You can see how much people love the wish tree. Please don't cut it down. Child, Francesca said firmly, it's time. Stefan pulled something from his jacket pocket. It was a small, leather-bound journal. So you found it, said Francesca. In the shed? Yep, said Stefan, handing the worn diary to her. It's a little damp, said Francesca. Samar pressed the key, its long ribbon dangling, into Francesca's palm. You should read it. Maybe someday. How about now? Stefan urged. Francesca sighed. You children need a hobby, you know that? She put the key in the silver lock, and the journal clicked open. The pages were yellow, the ink faded. Let me guess. It's about a tree that can talk. Actually, it's about this neighborhood, Stefan said. It's about us. Please, Samar said. Dear, it won't change anything, Francesca said. Please, Stefan said. Oh, fine, Francesca rolled her eyes. Gotta wait for the tree guys to finish getting set up. Sure, I'll glance it over. Maybe then you'll leave me in peace. Dragging Lewis and Clark behind her, Francesca went to Samar's porch, sat on the top step, and began to read. What do you think it says? It isn't easy, cutting down a big tree. It takes careful planning and people who know what they're doing. I'd seen neighboring trees cut down. I knew how things went. While Sandy and Max moved people to a safe distance, Stefan's parents watched from their porch and Samar's from theirs. Meanwhile, the tree people put ropes around my trunk and consulted one with another. A man and a woman carried over a huge chainsaw followed by the stump grinder. The grinder looked like a hungry animal. Actually, it looked a lot like a hungry animal. All those critters gone? Dave called to Francesca. Haven't seen any, she answered. Dave climbed a ladder and peered into my hollow as well as he could. He didn't seem to notice Bongo, who was hiding deep in the owl's former home. I sat patiently, awaiting my fate, while around me the world buzzed. A huge crowd filled with old neighbors and new friends had gathered. It seemed to see me off. Near the curb, some kids were making music. I don't know if it was good music, but it was most definitely loud music. I realized it was the garage band that Bongo liked. The whole thing was almost like a party. A going-away party. There it was, surrounding me, my wild and tangled and colorful garden. It wasn't such a bad day to leave the world, I decided. Not bad at all. Dave had a megaphone, and through it he reminded the crowd to stay behind the barriers that had been erected. This is a big tree, folks, he said, and when it goes, we don't want anyone else going with it. Bongo, I said in a voice that only she could hear. You need to get to a safe place. You heard him. I'm a big tree. You don't want to be in the way when I fall. I'm not going anywhere, she replied in her stubborn whisper. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine. But I'm staying with you, Red, and that's final. Dave turned to his workers. Okay, let's get this show on the road. Please, Bongo, I said softly but urgently. The saw moved closer. I waited, expecting to hear the painful roar of the chainsaw engine. Instead, a small but intense sound filled the air, something like a puppy growl mixed with a kitten hiss. It was a baby opossum. Darting through the huge crowd, across the muddy lawn, past Dave and his crew, around the massive saw, beneath the stump grinder, and finally triumphantly on my trunk was none other than Flashlight. He climbed straight to his former hollow and settled there, his tiny head poking out. He was panting and trembling and hiccuping, but he did not seem to be in any danger whatsoever of fainting. I missed you, Red, he said in a voice so small that only Bongo and I could hear it. Hold off on the saw, Dave yelled. Some dang animal just ran up the trunk. Bongo popped out of her hollow. Flash, she hissed, you can't be here. It's dangerous. They're about to, you know. You're here, Flash pointed out. Across the grass streaked Harry Spiders with her other babies trailing. She went straight to the opossum hollow where she proceeded to scold Flash as she snuggled him close. In the sky, little Harold suddenly appeared frantically flapping his wings like a fuzzy butterfly. Agnes and the rest of her brood followed. They settled into their old home as if they had never left. Bongo moved to home plate to make room for the owls. The ewes came next, trotting across the lawn. Last to join the group was a skunk family who quickly scrambled up my trunk. 7 opossums, 4 raccoons, 5 owls, and 6 skunks had waddled, scooted, dashed, and fluttered from their various homes just to see me off. My residents. My friends. The crowd was delighted. People applauded. They cheered. They laughed. Francesca, straining to get a look, accidentally let go of one of the kitten leashes, allowing Lewis and Clark to escape. They ran straight to me, clambering up my trunk to join the gang. It wasn't all perfection. The babies and parents were grumbling, but softly enough that none of the humans could hear. Ouch! Muttered Hot Buttered Popcorn. Your tail is in my mouth, cried one of the ewes. You smell like skunk, someone complained. I am a skunk, came the reply. Mom, asked Harold, should I be afraid of a cat? As a rule, yes, said Agnes, but this is a special circumstance. It took some effort, but eventually the entire group settled in together above the highest wishes. They gazed down calmly at the fascinated crowd below. One of the tree cutters took off his helmet and scratched his head. This just don't happen, he said to Dave. Those animals ought to be eating each other. It's some kind of crazy critter miracle, said another worker. He pulled out his smartphone. This is going on Facebook. Lots of other people seemed to have the same idea. Cameras clicked away. Ignoring the barricades, the reporters dashed over, microphones extended as if they were hoping to interview the animals. Bongo, always a bit of a ham, was happy to comply. Chip, please, she said to the microphone, waving beneath her. To show you, because it's so cute. Can you see? There we go. See all of the animals? There they all are, sitting in the tree. Dave gestured helplessly at Francesca. What is up with this menagerie, lady? How are we supposed to cut this tree down? Francesca, wiping away her tears, stood. She put her arms around Stefan and Samar. Slowly they made their way across the muddy grass. When she reached me, she pulled a bookmark from Maeve's journal before handing the book to Stefan. It was a strip of cloth made of blue striped fabric, frayed and faded. Maeve's wish. Carefully, Francesca tied it to my lowest branch, already crowded with wishes. She stared long and hard at the animals. Lewis and Clark purred happily. The crowd quieted. The only sound was the rustling of my leaves. Finally, Francesca spoke. Look, I don't do speeches. That's not my way. She patted my trunk. But here's the thing. Until today, I'd almost forgotten how important this old tree is to my family story. And from the look of it, she pointed at my residence, it's important to a few other families as well. Oh, goodness. Many people smiled and a few laughed. I hate this word, Francesca continued, running her hand over my carved bark. Hate it. My great-great-grandmother Maeve would have hated it just as much. Here in this neighborhood, we're better than this. She looked over at Samar's parents. We don't threaten people here. We welcome them. Francesca reached for Samar's hand. This tree is staying put, and I hope your family will too. That night, many hours after the crowd had scattered, Samar slipped out the front door of the little blue house. Stefan, who'd been watching from his bedroom window, joined her moments later. They sat silent beneath my wish-laden boughs. The slightest breath of wind sent the index cards fluttering like huge moths. Moonlight was everywhere, it seemed, on the wishes, on my branches, on the downy-headed owlets in the upturned gazes of Stefan and Samar. How beautiful we all were, bathed by the soft and silver light. Do you think your family will stay here? Stefan asked, after everything that's happened. I don't know, said Samar. I hope so. The breeze kicked up. Cards chattered. Ribbons danced. A scrap of notebook paper, loosely tied with red yarn to my lowest branch, broke free. Samar snatched at it as it swooped past. She squinted at the scribbled writing. Then she stood, carefully, tying the paper back onto my branch. What was that wish for? Stefan asked. An invisible robot that does homework. Seems unlikely. True, Samar leaned against my trunk and smiled. But then, so does a talking tree. If this were a fairy tale, I'd tell you there was something magical about that wishing day, that the world changed and that we all lived happily ever after. But this is real life, and real life, like a good garden, is messy. Some things have changed, some things haven't. Still, optimist that I am feeling hopeful about the future. Samar's parents decided not to move, at least for a while. Stefan and Samar have become good friends. Sometimes they do their homework at the base of my trunk. Their parents still don't talk to one another. I'm not sure they ever will. The police never found the boy who carved "Leave" into my trunk. But a couple of weeks ago, I saw him sauntering by, and I pointed him out to Bongo. Let's just say she made a very large deposit that day. All my residents are back where they belong, safe in their hollows. They still argue sometimes, but they haven't eaten one another. Francesca applied to the city to make me a heritage tree. That means I'm protected forever. She's also on a first-name basis with a local plumber who's learning to deal with my pushy roots. Lewis and Clark still haven't figured out how to walk on leashes. Bongo made a new friend. His name is Harley Davidson. I suspect we may have some crow newbies in our future. As for me, I promised Bongo I will never be a Budinsky again. I told her that my meddling days are over. And yet, here we are, you and I. What can I say? I'm more talkative than most trees. Still, if you find yourself standing near a particularly friendly-looking tree on a particularly lucky-feeling day, it can't hurt to listen up. Trees can't tell jokes, but we can certainly tell stories. So that is the end of the wish tree. Look for another short video possibly coming that we kind of talk about our thoughts and feelings of the wish tree. Look for in your assignments a way that project that you're going to do with the wish tree, an art project. Anyways, until next time.